Very simple in terms of what the procedures are, what the steps are, what the Congress is supposed to do, what the president is supposed to do. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. The question, because it is a serious issue, if you don't fund the government, then the government shuts down. There's a whole array of things that happen as a result of that, none of which are good. But the question is, will it be a serious process, or have we gotten to the point where Congress just doesn't even bother anymore doing it the right way because it has become so incredibly easy to do it the wrong way? And we can actually apply that to a whole host of things, including immigration and border security and taxes and a number of other things. When it becomes easier to do things the wrong way than it is to do them the right way, that's when we got to have a different kind of conversation. And so I want to get into this as we roll through September, because you're going to see this, you're going to hear it everywhere you turn until we get to September 30th. And it will be dubbed the shutdown showdown. It will be the big fight in Washington, D.C. It'll be all the things. Accusations will be flying from the left and the right in terms of what should be done, what has to be done, and what is not getting done. So last week, I spoke to a friend of the show and senior fellow at the R Street Institute, James Wallner. And he lays out, as only James can do, what needs to be done this month because, as I've said before, every year, every single year, September 30th comes. It's amazing. It should not be shocking to anyone. September 30th always comes. And yet we end up with these shutdown showdowns and these fake fights and false choices, and then we kick the can down the road. So I asked James Wallner just to lay it out for us in terms of what should happen during this month regarding the government funding.
And the House and Senate had plenty of time to get to work on these bills. With Majority Leader Schumer has said that the Democrats plan on bringing up some spending bills in September. But just for votes. On one hand, you're like, finally, but these are show votes. They're not, there's going to be no debate. He's only bringing up a handful of bills. They're going to be drive-by votes, and they're intended for messaging purposes. But on top of that, they're not even going to do that until the week after next week. Next week is going to be for nominations, which shows you how unserious they are when it comes to funding the government via regular order.
So it is an unserious conversation about doing it in regular order, doing it the right way. And so you're going to hear a lot about that as we go through the month. And members of Congress say, you know what, we'd love to do it the right way, but we just don't have time this year. It's like, no, you have all the time there is every year because there's 365 days in between, and you can make choices on what you choose to do. The fact that Congress continues to choose not to do one of the very few jobs that they do have, that's problematic, and that's why we end up in this mess. And the other part of that problem is when we hear this word continuing resolution, we've been told by politicians and elected officials that this just keeps spending at current levels. So it's just kind of putting things on autopilot. That's bad in and of itself. But it's actually worse than bad because that's not the only thing that happens. We always have a continuing resolution which keeps spending going at current levels plus. President Biden has already put in a list of plus requests of things he'd like to plus up in the continuing resolution so that there is more spending. James explained why the continuing resolutions aren't the fix to the problem. And why they actually are part of the problem.
Well, strictly speaking, a CR, a continuing resolution, it shouldn't plus up things. It shouldn't have funding riders. It shouldn't have policy on it in theory. In reality, it has lots of policy riders on it, and they plus up lots of different accounts. If you're not on the Appropriations Committee and you're not in leadership, or you're not the president, and you want to offer an amendment to the bill to restrict the government's power in some way or to change funding, you're told that this is a CR and it's clean. But they're not clean. They have these things on there. And this is just making determinations about policy behind closed doors.
So they're doing this behind closed doors. There are all of these plus things. So the president has put in his request list of all the things he wants to plus up in terms of spending. Other members in that Appropriations Committee will have their own little pet projects that they'll plus up a little bit. And this is part of how you get $32 trillion in debt. Is you say not only are we going to be serious about doing the budgeting process and the spending appropriations process, but we're going to just keep spending going out of control as it has been, and we're going to add a little bit more to it because we can. And that's the problem. Now, James went on to talk about the fact that this has become way too easy. And leaders of both political parties recognize that this works really well for them because it pushes members a certain way, both in the House and in the Senate, because then you end up with a last-minute vote, large spending package, nobody's read it, and there are no options at that point.
The whole point of this, as you know, is that they're creating an environment. They're setting up a process where members are going to feel compelled to vote a certain way, or members can vote the way they want to vote, and they can tell their constituents who want them to vote differently that they had no choice, but they had to vote that way. And that's what this whole process is about. It's about waiting until the last minute and then putting a massive funding bill on the floor and forcing members to say yes or no. Every single time you're going to get enough members to say yes to pass it.
Finally, I asked James about how do we change this course we're on, and how do we actually turn it so that Congress will actually do the job they signed up to do, which to me is the real test.
Ultimately, it's the people. As you said, the people have to enforce what they want when the Congress doesn't give it to them. And if the Congress repeatedly does this, then the people have to make sure that there are repercussions, and they have to not send certain members back, and they have to vote for representatives who are going to go to Congress and actually do the job of being a member of Congress. And until that changes, right now that, it appears like the people seem to be okay with CRs. But until that changes, I wouldn't expect this behavior to change at all.
So it is partially up to us, we the people. We have to say, look, if you don't want to do the job we elected you to do, then we're going to help you get to do another job. And that's by voting somebody else into the job. We have to hold them accountable because this is part of a perpetual problem. It's left and right, Democrats and Republicans, and it is the biggest problem in terms of how we get to this idea of $32 trillion in debt. Now, it's really simple. Just do the job. Pass the 12 appropriations bill. Don't be shocked that September 30th is coming because it comes every year. One of our texters just chimed in and said their birthday is on the 30th. They are probably a second witness for me that September the 30th comes every single year. So happy birthday, and you'll be celebrating with members of Congress as they will be up late that night trying to fund the government. So the question to me is, are we going to continue to have this same broken process? Are we going to continue to allow members of Congress to not be serious about this? And it starts with the leaders. Make no mistake about it. I think James was spot on when he said, look, a lot of this is designed by leadership to force members into really no choices because it's the false choice. You either have to shut down the government or we have to spend all of this money. And the reality is that is a false choice presented by Democrats and Republicans alike. Those four leaders in the House and the Senate, the majority and minority leader in both chambers, are the ones who make this thing continue to go this way. And I'm going to make my formal prediction today so Bella can record this today. We will end up with a continuing resolution before September the 30th, and that continuing resolution is going to go until my birthday, December the 14th. So we will get to do this all over again on my birthday in December because they're going to kick the can down the road with a continuing resolution plus billions more in spending on top of that. We know that the deficit spending for this year is going to be $4 trillion. In other words, we're going to spend $4 trillion more than the government takes in. That's not sustainable on any planet, definitely not on this planet. It's a serious issue, and I continue to question if Congress is going to take it seriously.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Before you head to work, before you hit the gym,
Keep going, that's it.
before you make your way home,
Bye.
get a quick check on traffic and weather.
PD on the scene at 8 South and West Temple.
Highway 89 also really backed up.
Listen every 10 minutes on the 9s, in your car at 102.7 FM, or tell Alexa, play KSL News Radio.
You know, Deb, I'm a huge DIY guy, but one thing I'm not going to touch is electrical.
I've got the answer for you. You have to call Master Electrical. They have what's called upfront pricing. You know how bids can be a guessing game, and the longer an expert's in your home, the bigger the bill is? Not with Master Electrical. This upfront pricing is amazing.
Yeah, their pricing system won't even allow them to go higher.
They do everything that has to do with electrical. You need lights? Call Master Electrical. Ceiling fans, smoke detectors, generators, batteries, even EV chargers.
And all that pricing is upfront, and it's a guarantee.
Master Electrical proudly serves from Logan to Santaquin.
And they're always open, so if you have some emergency, they're there. Make sure you give them a call today at 866-569-0860, 866-569-0860.
Or you can check them out online at masterelectrical.com.
Do it today.
The Utah Division of Emergency Management says make a plan. Identify a meeting place outside your home in case of fire and outside your neighborhood in case you're separated in a disaster. Get a kit. Besides your disaster kit, have at least a 2-week supply of food and water stored at home. Be informed. Check your earthquake and flood insurance. And finally, get involved. Remember, when family members take action toward preparedness, you will all be ready. For more, visit beready.utah.gov. That's beready.utah.gov.
Don't be worried, be ready. KSL News Radio is partnering with Be Ready Utah to provide the plans your family needs for an emergency, the tools and supplies to keep on hand, and the knowledge on how to keep a cool head. It's Be Ready Utah. Listen for Be Ready tips and tools each Tuesday with Dave Dujanovic. Plus, find the latest preparation info at beready.utah.gov. That's beready.utah.gov. Be Ready Utah with KSL News Radio.
Hey, Derek Overstreet here from the New Millennium Group, financial advisors in Utah. You know, I've been helping people retire in the state of Utah for the last 20 years. The way we do that is we actually find out what is important to you. We create a step-by-step plan that takes into consideration your income, your debt, whether you want money from real estate, stock market, annuities, life insurance, whatever. If you want to deal with professionals, people that are fiduciaries and have a legal responsibility and obligation to do what's in your best interest, give my team a call at 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370. Or go to my website, utahsfinancialplanner.com. If you'd like to retire 3 to 5 years before you thought it was possible, give my team a call right now. 888-999-6370. That's 888-999-6370.
Listen to the greatest classical hits from the 1700s to today. The Utah Symphony's Masterworks concerts offer elegant and entertaining evenings at Marisa Brovnal Hall in the heart of Salt Lake City, featuring timeless masterpieces by Beethoven, Dvorak, and Mozart, and even world premieres from modern composers. Tickets start as low as $21. Get yours at utahsymphony.org. The Utah Symphony presents one of the biggest hits from 1893, Dvorak's New World Symphony. A piece so iconic it inspired the scores for Jaws and Star Wars, and even joined Neil Armstrong during the first moon landing in 1969. This is your perfect first symphony concert. Join the Utah Symphony September 15th and 16th for a jaw-dropping performance of Dvorak's New World Symphony. Tickets start as low as $21. Get yours today at utahsymphony.org.
Visit Serenoni Luxury Blanket Warehouse Sale Wednesday, September 6th at Orion Event Center in Linden. Save on the world's softest blankets for babies to adults. Get huge discounts on the best gifts ever.
Join KSL News Radio's Amanda Dixon at the grand opening of the new Bedrock Quartz location in Murray, Wednesday, September 6th from 1 to 4, bedrockquartz.com.
Get deeper insights on the news from inside sources.
We're going to continue with the conversation about trouble with money. The trouble with money. It's never been more important to discuss. It's a serious issue, and yet Congress continues to be completely unserious in dealing with it. And joining us on the show to break it down, as he always does, Brian Riegel, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute, focusing on budget, tax, and economic policy. And Brian, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So we have a news flash for Congress. September 30th comes every year. And they're going to do this shutdown, showdown thing one more time, and they're going to do another continuing resolution. And we've been pacified into believing it just keeps things as normal, continued spending. But there's the plus stuff that always gets thrown in there. And that's how you get all kinds of deficits and $32 trillion in debt. You've been following closely what's happening this year in terms of the deficit spending. Give us a quick breakdown. Where are we?
Yeah, the numbers are really staggering. There was a report in the Washington Post this weekend by Jeff Stein that I helped out with, along with a couple other think tank analysts, showing that it looks like the deficit this year is going to double from last year's level. If you wipe out the student loan stuff because it didn't happen, and you wipe that off the books because it was canceled, the budget deficit will have jumped from $1 trillion last year to $2 trillion this year. Not only is it going to be the biggest deficit in American history outside of World War II, the Great Recession, and COVID, but it's also going to be the biggest jump we've had without war or recession at all. I mean, this is usually when the economy is at least modestly growing and we're not in a major war, the deficit is usually dropping. So to have a $1 trillion growth in deficit in 1 year during relative peace and prosperity is completely unprecedented and terrifying.
Yeah, so let's get to some of the underlying causes of that in terms of, obviously, spending is one component, revenue is another, inflation is factoring in as well.
What's happened on the spending side is the most important, which is that interest rates are rising. And this is something that I have been warning for years, that the government borrowed $25 trillion on the hope that interest rates would never rise again. Well, they are rising, as we all know. And what that means is that the interest costs on the debt have jumped from $350 billion 2 years ago to $700 billion this year, and they're projected to go to $1.5 trillion by the end of the decade. That's just the interest. That's just from rising interest rates. Then you also have Social Security and Medicare from rising baby boomers. You have about $5 trillion in 10-year spending signed by President Biden, and you have revenues coming back down to earth as inflation ends, and we're in trouble.
That is, there's a number of things I want to unpack there, and just to take it all to the personal level, we all know what it's like when you get stuck with that high-interest credit card or you get locked into some high-interest loan, and just how hard it is to chip away at things when you're just paying a whole lot that's just going towards the interest payment. So the fact that we're at $700 billion a year just in interest payment, which means that can't be spent on Social Security or Medicare or any other whatever your favorite program is. It can't be spent. That's a big chunk of change.
Yeah, I mean, the U.S. has behaved kind of like a subprime borrower. What happened was when interest rates were low, we decided to take on all these huge debt commitments. All the new spending programs, Social Security and Medicare were allowed to grow on the promise that, well, interest rates are low. The problem is the debt is forever, but the government didn't actually lock in those low interest rates. They used short-term adjustable teaser interest rates to make permanent debt commitments. So what happens is if at any point interest rates ever rise again, the whole debt rolls over into the higher interest rate. And again, you know, when anybody who buys a house, you know, you can't get an adjustable rate and assume it's going to stay that way for 30 years. You got to lock in the rate or don't take on the debt.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's one component to it, obviously, is just that interest payment alone has been going up so quickly. Talk about some of the other components that, again, are just adding, again, $2 trillion, spending $2 trillion more than you've got or that's coming in. That's just a staggering number.
Yeah, I mean, you also have Social Security and Medicare, which we knew this was coming decades ago from retiring baby boomers. The annual shortfall in the Social Security and Medicare programs is rising by about $150 billion a year. That's how much the programs pay out minus how much revenue they collect in payroll taxes and premium. $150 billion per year every year. On top of that, President Biden's spending spree and a lot of the leftover funding from things like COVID have dramatically pushed up spending. If you just want to go since 2019, let's go right before the pandemic. If you adjust for inflation, education spending is up 81%, veteran spending 31%, Medicaid 27%, income security 33%, health care 60%. That's above inflation. That's not 60%, and then you count inflation. That's 60% faster than inflation. You just can't you can't sustain a budget when spending is growing 80% faster than inflation.
Yeah, and so let's get to the end game here. We talk about it at my house in terms of the absolute predictability of consequences. my grandchildren, my children didn't learn it as well, but my grandchildren are really figuring it out, that there is an absolute predictability of consequences. And so where are we headed, and what is it that's going to change that dynamic?
Well, what's going to happen is at some point, because this is unsustainable, the bond market is going to basically stop lending Washington enough money for these deficits at low interest rates. They're just going to say, we don't have enough money to lend to you, and we certainly don't have enough to lend it to you at 1 or 2% interest rates. When that happens, the federal government is going to be forced to stop the borrowing spree. They're going to be forced to rein in the deficit, and that means tax hikes and spending cuts. Politicians are usually the last to know. So when you talk to politicians, they're going to keep promising and pandering. We're going to cut your taxes. We're going to hike your spending. We're not going to touch senior benefits. But eventually the math always wins. And the bond market always wins. And if they stop lending us enough money to cover these deficits, we're going to have to end the party and start consolidating.
Yeah, that is the ultimate and absolute predictability of the consequences. It does actually come, and of course, as you said, the politicians seem to be the last to know, and they're always surprised.
They are.
Just like they're surprised that September 30th is actually coming this year once again, and they have yet to pass the appropriations bills. All of that folds into a big old mess in Washington, D.C., one that we've got to get straight. And I think if we have people who don't want to do that job, we all need to help them find another job that they'll be happier in, because we need someone to have the real conversation. Is anybody having this conversation? Is there any indicators, quickly, Brian, in terms of people you're seeing starting to have a serious conversation about this?
There are some lawmakers who are at least sounding the alarm. The problem is even the ones sounding the alarm usually aren't proposing solutions, and that's the hard work. Your Senator Romney in your state is doing really well at proposing solutions. A lot of others are just screaming, but not trying to fix it.
Yeah, so much to be done. Brian Riedel, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Always appreciate your perspective and helping us understand the numbers, what they mean, and again, that absolute predictability of consequences is coming. Brian, thanks for helping us out today.
Thank you so much.
All right, we'll step aside for some bottom-of-the-hour news. That's serious stuff. I wish Congress would get serious about solving it because it has to be done. We can't treat this as an unserious political issue anymore. It's too serious. We'll be right back.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top local story this hour. Salt Lake City police say they're working with the fire department to after recovering a body from the Jordan River near the Rose Park golf course. They haven't said how old the victim is or even whether it's a man or a woman. They do have homicide detectives involved, which is routine in an investigation like this. Burning Man attendees are headed back home after the burning of the wooden sculpture was postponed to Monday. Adam from Salt Lake City got back on Sunday and says the conditions weren't as bad as everyone was saying.
Definitely brought people closer together, like having camps, combined resources to try to help each other out, which is something that's always kind of within the culture, but definitely saw that more as people were limited in how far they could travel.
He says the bad weather allowed attendees to get to know each other and experience the sense of community the Burning Man gathering represents. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. We have fresh pledges of American support for Ukraine after President Zelensky fired his defense minister over the weekend. That followed allegations of corruption within the ministry earlier this year. State Department spokesperson Vedant Patel answered questions about the shakeup today.
We have a strong and deep partnership with our Ukrainian partners, and we will continue to stand with Ukraine. It's, of course, up to President Zelensky and his government to make his own personnel decisions.
Ukraine says its counteroffensive against Russian troops in their country is advancing, but slowly. Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down on the day, 141 points right now. The NASDAQ up but just barely, about 6 points. And our KSL weather drying out and clearing up. That's next. KSL News Time, 1:32.
Start your days with knowledgeable, friendly voices telling you about the latest news and weather out there.
Hi, this is Tim Hughes and Amanda Dixon
In the business of waking you up each morning from 5 to 9.
on KSL News Radio.
Have you checked out Hercules Credit Union? They have locations in Taylorsville, Harriman, Riverton, and Salt Lake City, and, of course, always at HerculesCU.com. You can find them online anytime, anywhere. Right now, you have an extraordinary opportunity with Hercules Credit Union to go for the gold. Open a checking account at Hercules First Federal Credit Union, qualify for their gold tier checking status in the first 90 days, and they will deposit $200 directly into your account. So not only do you get all the benefits of being a gold tier checking member, you also get all of the benefits that go with that. Ultimate identity theft protection, you get travel benefits, cellular care coverage, health and wellness savings, family benefits, Ticket Express, and on and on and on it goes. It's a great time to gold for the gold with our friends at Hercules Credit Union. As I said, you can find their locations just about anywhere, and you can always find them online at HerculesCU.com. That's HerculesCU.com.
I have diabetes. I'm at risk for pneumococcal pneumonia.
I have asthma. I'm at risk too.
If you're 19 or older with chronic conditions like asthma, diabetes, COPD, or heart disease, or are 65 or older, you are at increased risk for pneumococcal pneumonia. Ask your doctor or pharmacist about Prevnar 20, pneumococcal 20-valent conjugate vaccine, a vaccine that can help protect you against pneumococcal pneumonia in just one dose. Even if you've already been vaccinated with other pneumonia vaccines, Prevnar 20 may help provide added protection. Prevnar 20 is approved for adults to help prevent infections from 20 strains of the bacteria that cause pneumococcal pneumonia. Continued approval may depend on a supportive study. Don't get Prevnar 20 if you've had a severe allergic reaction to the vaccine or its ingredients. Adults with weakened immune systems may have a lower response to the vaccine. Side effects include pain and swelling at the injection site, fatigue, headache, muscle, and joint pain. For full prescribing information, please call 1-855-213-2138 or visit Prevnar20.com.
The Utah RV Super Show, the premier RV event of the year, is back at Mountain America Expo, Thursday, September 14th through Sunday, September 17th. Come see the new 2024 models and special closeout pricing on all 2023 models. Bring a can of food for the Utah Food Bank and get $1 off per can, up to half off adult admission. Unplug from distractions and plug into your family at the Utah RV Super Show. Discount passes at UtahRVSupershow.com.
I can't believe how much it costs for gas now.
I never pay full price. I just use the free Upside app, and I get cash back for every gallon of gas I buy.
You actually get paid real cash when you buy gas with the Upside app?
I earn back up to 25 cents a gallon every time I buy gas. I've made over $300 already.
Download the free Upside app to earn real cash back every time you buy gas. Use promo code MORE18 for an extra 25 cents per gallon cash back in your first fill-up. That's code MORE18. Cashback's not available in gas in New Jersey and Wisconsin.
Fall in love with the Five Balls Restaurant this autumn season. A Salt Lake City original featuring a cozy atmosphere. Perfect for all your special occasions.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
A pretty nasty accident in Weber County is tying up traffic in both directions on Highway 89. This crash involving multiple vehicles and possibly a rolled vehicle is at Combe Road in South Weber. It's been blocking left lanes both directions. Now, traffic is getting by, but doing so very slowly, even with lanes blocked. It's a spot you want to avoid and use an alternate route. Sprinkler system on autopilot. It's time to dial back outdoor watering. For more ways to save water, visit Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District at jvwcd.org/conservation. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather mostly sunny and cool, a high only up to 79 today, then warms up through the rest of the week with highs close to 90 by Friday. And right now, 75 degrees and sunny at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
GOP presidential candidate Chris Christie has been campaigning hard in New Hampshire. In fact, some think he may be a resident of New Hampshire. Obviously, it's a critical early state in the presidential primary. And interesting to see. Obviously, Chris Christie has spent a lot of time focused on the former president, but he's also found that when he focuses on other things, he actually gets some traction in some interesting places and spaces. Really thrilled to have back on the program with us today Lisa Kaczynski. She is the author of the Massachusetts Playbook for Politico. Always has great insight for us. And Lisa, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, of course, a lot going on up New Hampshire way, and obviously we're past Labor Day now, so it's time to get really serious. You had a great piece in Politico talking about some of the support that Chris Christie's been gaining in New Hampshire from a pretty interesting source. Tell us about it.
Yes, not the source of support that you would think that a Republican presidential candidate would be going after, but Chris Christie is attracting a lot of eyes from Democrats these days. The Republican former governor of New Jersey is spending a lot of time in New Hampshire. As you said, he's really staking his campaign on New Hampshire more so than Iowa because he's more moderate, which aligns more with New Hampshire's politics. And it's also attracting Democrats, a little bit less so for his policies and more so for his bashing of former President Donald Trump. But we're seeing in on-the-ground interest, both that myself and my colleague Mia McCarthy, who I worked on this story with, were able to observe over his campaign events there. And we're also seeing it in just kind of national polling, both before and after the first debate. The Democrats like what they're hearing from the Republican Chris Christie.
Yeah, so fascinating. Let's get into some of that, some of the conversations you and, as you mentioned, your tag team partner, Mia McCarthy, on that piece. Give us some sense of what did you hear from some of those New Hampshire Democrats in relation to Governor Christie?
So New Hampshire Democrats are weighing a few things right now. They're looking at, a nominee who is a potential nominee, I should say, in President Joe Biden on their side, who is going to be in his 80s. They're looking at the fact that he's trying to strip the state of its first presidential primary on the Democratic side, which has caused some anger among Democrats in New Hampshire. So they're looking for other options. In some cases, that's maybe some of the other Democrats who are running, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Marianne Williamson. In some cases, it might be a third party like No Labels if they put a candidate forward. And in other cases, it's Chris Christie, where they see a moderate Republican who's attacking Trump, a person Democrats obviously don't like. And this is someone and who has a track record of working across the aisle in New Jersey and, romped to a second term as governor there with Democratic support. And these Democrats in New Hampshire are looking at all of that, seeing a younger person, someone with bipartisan appeal and a willingness to still work across the aisle. And they're saying, hey, maybe we switch parties or at least unenroll and become independent voters, which in New Hampshire can pull ballots for either party's primary. And maybe we play on the Republican side for Christie.
I think that's where it gets really interesting when you start getting that cross move there in terms of some of those Democrats going to independent and then being able to vote in those presidential primaries gets really interesting. And obviously, Governor Christie, having governed in a very blue state, did have to do a lot of that. I think he was really ribbed heavily on the Republican side during the disaster there in New Jersey where then President Barack Obama came. They had the meeting on the tarmac. And yet I think Chris Christie is saying, look, when it comes to a natural disaster or something like that, you do put the politics on the shelf. You can have your battles later on. And I think some of that's starting to make people think, well, yeah, maybe that's not such a bad thing after all.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that, more moderate Republicans, independents in New Hampshire, and yes, even these Democrats who are, looking across the aisle a little bit, that's something that they all long to see. I mean, remember that New England is the home of these moderate Republican governors, liberal blue New England in states like New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Vermont, for decades have elected moderate Republican governors who do exactly that. They work across the aisle. They're able to put aside differences, party differences and partisan politics to, work with the other side to get things done in disasters or otherwise. That's something that's always proved popular in New England, and that's sort of what you're seeing here as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, Lisa, we're going to attack this a little bit in our next segment, and I'd love your perspective on this because it's so interesting. So clearly, Chris Christie is staking it all, or a heavy chunk of the bet is going on New Hampshire. And the question is that balance between running kind of a general election style campaign versus a primary campaign. And, you don't get to compete in the general unless you win the primary. And is that going to be an ongoing challenge for Governor Christie, even beyond New Hampshire?
I think you're seeing that that's really a challenge for a lot of the field at this point. They can't, a lot of these Republicans, Christie at least is kind of doing the primary battle of kind of hitting former President Donald Trump and really going after him, and his record, both electorally and in the White House. But a lot of the other Republicans aren't doing that right now because, Trump does maintain a hold over a chunk of the GOP base. So you see several candidates struggling with kind of this general election Biden messaging at a time when they still need to make it through a primary and find a way to dent Trump. So I think it's a problem that, any candidate not named Trump is facing right now, both in New Hampshire and the other early states.
Yeah. And anything else that you're keeping your eye closely on, Lisa, as we're kind of in this in-between period? We've made it past Labor Day. Next debate's about 3 weeks out. What are you watching for?
That's one of the things that I'm watching for is who's able to, we saw Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, even Mike Pence have arguably good nights on that first debate stage. And, can they translate that into any momentum? It's not looking like more than just a few polling points at this point. But between now and the next debate, these candidates have to find a way to really dent Trump's lead. And Trump is very strong in New Hampshire and elsewhere right now. We see that. New Hampshire is the state that handed him his first primary win in 2016. So it's a really uphill battle, and that's what I'm really looking to see if any of these candidates start changing their messaging towards Trump and really start to get some movement in New Hampshire.
Fantastic perspective, as always. Lisa Kaczynski, author of the Massachusetts Playbook for Politico, and always gives us great analysis. Lisa, thanks for weighing in today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's Lisa Kaczynski, and great insight there. Chris Christie's running a very interesting gamut in terms of his campaign. We're going to stay with that conversation, talk about the difference between primary election strategy, general election strategy, and what the path looks like as we roll into 2024. Stick around. We'll be right back.
When the day's almost done,
Another day, another dollar.
there's the drive home. Put Jeff Kaplan in the passenger seat.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, thanks. You're in my car.
Yep, let me catch you up.
Jeff has traffic and weather together every 10 minutes on the nines, breaking stories, and his signature minute of news. It's like Jeff's there just for you.
This is a little awkward.
Isn't it great?
Jeff Kaplan's Afternoon News, 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
As the weather turns colder, this is when you need to get those new windows. So call Advanced Window Products. They'll replace your single-pane, rickety old windows with stylish, state-of-the-art double-pane windows with precision frames. You pick the style and color. They're custom-made right here in Salt Lake City. This company is so Utah. It's run by two guys who grew up here, Jake Weber and Utes defensive star Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sacktown with 7 NFL seasons under his belt. Great guys, great company building high-quality windows for 37 years. Unlike other companies, they build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. No middleman. There's Jake, Nate, and their team, and there's you. Saving on the highest quality windows. Right now, before winter, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more, and they offer 60 months, 0% financing. So call Advanced Window Products now. You could have stylish new windows in 8 weeks. 801-850-9100. 801-850-9100, or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
Hey, BYU football fans, come see KSL's own Mitch Harper this Friday, September 8th at Macy's Grocery Store in American Fork, 135 East Main Street from 4 to 7 p.m. for fun, prizes, and chances to win tickets to the BYU Southern Utah football game or a $50 Macy's gift card. You'll have multiple chances to win every hour. And during the broadcast, be sure to visit the Macy's Meat Department and pick up some of their easy meals. They're all cut, seasoned, and prepared for you. Just put them on the grill or in the oven, and you have dinner and a snap. Meals that are perfect for dinner or any tailgate party. So celebrate the football season and join KSL's own Mitch Harper this Friday, September 8th at Macy's Tailgate at American Fork from 4 to 7 p.m. Food, activities for the family, and enter to win tickets to the BYU Southern Utah football game or a $50 Macy's gift card. Macy's. Happy shopping!
Meet Mary. Mary has a rewards checking account with You First Credit Union. By using her You First Rewards debit card, Mary collects points every month and can use them for things like gifts and cash back. With You First, Mary is happy because her everyday purchases always add up to extraordinary rewards. You can earn rewards too. Learn more about You First Rewards checking at youfirstcu.com. That's the letter U, FIRSTCU.com.
Every 40 seconds, someone dies by suicide. We have the power to change that. Join Promise to Live and promise right now that if you are ever feeling sad, depressed, hopeless, or suicidal, you'll reach out to a friend, family member, 988, or another resource. We need you. Go to promisetolive.org, and once you make the promise, share it. Stop the stigma, start the conversations, and save lives.
Getting help with electrical repairs is easier than you think. All you have to do is call Any Hour Services or schedule an appointment at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
KSL Broadcast Group contests are open to participants 13 years of age and older that are residents of Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, and Nevada, unless otherwise specified. Employees or agents of the station, Bonneville International Corporation, or other area radio stations, or any entity associated with the contest may not enter. Persons who have won in the last 90 days from a station contest or event are not eligible. Full general contest rules are available at kslnewsradio.com.
I'm Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I learned about atrial fibrillation the hard way. My symptoms would come and go, shortness of breath, fatigue. I kept going. Then I got so lightheaded, I couldn't. My doctor said I have AFib, so I'm about 5 times more likely to have a stroke. Other symptoms, irregular heartbeat, heart racing, chest pain can come and go, but the risk of stroke stays. If you have symptoms, tell a doctor. Visit notimetowait.com.
Sponsored by Bristol-Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
Dave and Dujanovic.
I hope our listeners take away lots of information, but also a new way of looking at a topic.
Ideas, their thoughts, the things they thought they knew. I hope that gets challenged when they listen to us.
I've had listeners stop me at the grocery store and ask me, what is your show about? And I'll tell them our show is anything from politics to your pocketbook.
Listen for Dave and Dujanovic 9 to noon on KSL News Radio.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Salt Lake City police are investigating how a body wound up in the Jordan River at the Rose Park Golf Course. Second, thousands of people still squelching their way out of the muddy lake bed at Burning Man. And third, Ukraine's president has replaced his defense minister. The U.S. says that's his business. Right now, 75 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, now that we're past Labor Day, that, of course, has traditionally been the kickoff day for election season. But campaigning for the 2024 presidential election is so far, and we're almost a year into it already, which we need to address at some point, that we're just starting these things way, way, way too early. We'll come back to that later in the week. It's interesting since, of course, former president kicked off his campaign in November of 2022, so he is almost a year in. And the question I want to dig into in this segment is some candidates are running a campaign to win the primary. Others seem to be running a campaign that's a little more suited towards a general election. And so I want to break that down in terms of what that is, what that means, and how it all gets deciphered as you move it along. So there is a difference between primary and general election campaigning. There's a difference between primary and general election messaging. And so I want to look at some of the candidates in terms of what they're doing and how that might play well in one space but not in the other. Because the real question that a candidate has to grapple with is you actually have to do both. You have to win a primary and you have to win a general election in order to become president of the United States. I know that's shocking material, but the interesting thing is many people don't understand how to navigate that. Primary voters, of course, tend to be more of the base of the political party, whether that's Democrats or Republicans. General election, you have to broaden the message out a little bit to get to those independent voters that often end up deciding big elections, especially presidential elections. And so as you look at how you go about that, let's start with the primary election. Again, more towards the base of the party. Those that play to the base of the party currently, of course, former President Trump, Vivek Ramaswamy, is clearly playing a very populist, very primary election-centric kind of messaging. You've had others in this field for the Republicans that are much more kind of a general election strategy. Nikki Haley has been in that space. Tim Scott has been in that place. Ron DeSantis, I'm not sure he's kind of flipped between and hasn't quite got his footing yet, I don't think, in terms of what that messaging actually looks like. But again, the challenge is, do you have a message that plays well in the spring that can win you a primary election, and can you pivot to the fall and win? Or if you're running on a general election strategy, can you actually use that and win a primary? And all of those theories are being tested this time around between the different candidates. Whether you have someone like a Nikki Haley or a Tim Scott, again, both playing a lot of general election style themes. You have someone like Asa Hutchinson, very much running a general election style message. And I think that's partly why you haven't really seen any of the candidates who are not named former President Trump get any real traction because they have been on messaging that is broader and more general, and they haven't quite hit that crucial point in terms of traction. And so that's going to be an interesting thing to watch, I think, particularly over the next 3 weeks as we march our way towards the next debate. For the Republicans, someone's going to have to sharpen things up just a little bit. I think the person who has had the most interesting little moments of traction is actually former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. We talked about that in the last section of the show with Lisa Kaczynski from Politico, that he has part of his campaign that is hardcore anti-former President Trump, and he has a portion of his campaign that is very policy-centric, and what it took him to be a Republican governor in a very blue state in New Jersey, and what it required him to do, how he was able to get things done. His reelection was a cakewalk. And so is there an interesting model there that could appeal both to primary voters and then translate into the general? Interestingly, in New Hampshire, there are a large number of Democrats who are suddenly interested in Chris Christie. They see someone who's governed a state. They like that part of the message, and I think they honestly like that he's beating up on the former president as part of his campaign. And so I think that's resonating there. So those are interesting test components, and we'll watch all of those as we march our way towards the next Republican debate. Of course, we have a big primary election here in the state of Utah today, and we'll watch that throughout the afternoon here on KSL News Radio. And we don't expect we'll see any real results in terms of that special election in the 2nd Congressional District with the number of mail-in ballots that can be postmarked today. So if you haven't voted yet, you can still get your ballot in and have that count. It's going to take a couple of days, I think, to sort that one all the way through. Now, I want to spend the last couple of minutes of this hour looking at those who are in the lead currently. Of course, President Biden is squarely the Democratic nominee at this point, barring any kind of major meltdown or any major shift there. Currently, the former president is way ahead in terms of polling. Again, there's a lot of dynamics on that. But those two both have really high negatives which makes it really fascinating that they are the two leaders for their parties. They both have very high negatives, and nobody in the country seems to want to see a rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And yet that's kind of what we're careening towards, unless the dynamics shift. On President Biden's side, he's facing a lot of questions about his age. The economy continues to be a challenge, inflation, and even though some of the numbers can appear to be good and improving, the president hasn't figured out how to message that in a way that feels congruent to the American people. And so many would say, oh, he's a very weak candidate going into re-election. And normally I would say that would be accurate, except for the best thing that Joe Biden has going for him for re-election is Donald Trump. Now let's flip the script. Also very high in the negatives, unfavorability, as high as it goes, is the former president. And yet he's leading the Republican field currently. And the best thing that the former president has going for him is the current president, Joe Biden, because he appears to be weak. And so it appears that Trump could beat Biden in a rematch. And so in a very ironic way, I think the reason we're sort of at a stalemate in these contests is because those that nobody really wants to see for the next 4 years are propping each other up. It's the ultimate irony. Joe Biden does far better against a potential matchup against Donald Trump than he would someone else in the Republican field. And the reason that Donald Trump continues to be out in front, despite a lot of legal challenges and a lot of distractions and loss in the last round, is that it appears that he could beat President Joe Biden. So it's a real ironic thing that these two, both with a lot of high negatives, both with a lot of high questions in terms of voters who don't think they're fit or should be there or all the other reasons, and there's a lot of them, they're actually propping each other up, which is sort of freezing out the rest of the field. Both on the Democratic side, no one else is really wanting to get in. And on the Republican side, nobody is really getting traction because it seems to be this lesser of two evils choice that we settled for in 2020. Now, I don't think that's going to stay static all the way through 2024 because campaigns and election seasons are never static. So the one thing we know for sure is that there will be moments of change. There will be moments where a candidate can capture lightning in a bottle, can capture that little moment of magic. And then the question is, can they translate that? Can they transform it into a movement? And it can happen. And so we'll continue to watch all of that as we march our way through and as we continue to follow the candidates as we've now officially kicked things off formally as we have passed Labor Day and the game is on. And just as a reminder as we close out hour number one, if you haven't voted yet in the municipal and the primary elections today, you still can. You can still get your ballot in either at a ballot box or in the mail. You can still get that in today as well. Well, that wraps up hour number one of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We'll step aside for some top-of-the-hour news. Don't go anywhere. Much more in hour number two of Inside Sources coming up next on KSL News Radio.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM. KSL News Radio, your all-day companion for news.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. Ogden police say a dispute between two men escalated into a shooting last night. The men had been arguing over some property near 700 North Liberty when the shooting occurred. The 31-year-old victim died at the scene. Officers say the other man, Brendan Powell, cooperated with police and was taken into custody. There was a tense hour at Olympus High School today with the whole school put on lockdown for a bit. The school district says it was all precautionary. KSL News Radio's Amy Kobe reports.
The students here went into lockdown right before they normally would have been let out for lunch. The school district says there was never a direct threat to the school, but they still went into lockdown while they checked. We heard earlier from the district that one student of interest was detained, but now they say that that was just precautionary and the school resumed as normal.
The students were let out to get lunch before the normal schedule started back up. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. United Airlines had a technology glitch on Tuesday morning, preventing United flights from taking off for a while. ABC's Alex Stone has details.
United isn't specifying what the technology issue, as it calls it, was. We understand the computers had to be rebooted and some critical system came back online. For about an hour, all United flights were held at their airports, unable to take off. Planes waited at United hubs like San Francisco, Denver, Chicago, Houston, and Newark. Any planes that were already in the air were not impacted. Now the airline says it's working to get everything back on schedule. 211 United flights were delayed because of the issue. Alex Stone, ABC News.
Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average near the close of trading now down 195 points on the day so far. The NASDAQ slipped back into negative territory, and it was down about 10 points. And our KSL weather, clearing right up and warming up. That's next. KSL News Time 2:02.
Early mornings can be hard enough, just getting yourself going.
We try to make it a little easier with news and weather from comfortable, trusted anchors and reporters.
Join us on Utah's Morning News between 5 and 9
on KSL News Radio.
Is shopping for medical supplies online leaving you feeling intimidated and overwhelmed? Hi, I'm Jay Broadbent with Alpine Home Medical. I want to share a real customer story with you.
The moment I walked into Alpine, I felt cared for. They pulled me into a private room, and the Alpine professional happily set up my CPAP machine, explaining everything I needed to know. The service didn't stop there. After I went home, Alpine called me a week later just to check on me. These guys really are the experts. Before Alpine, I was so stressed trying to navigate what I needed online by myself, but all the stress went away when I went to their store. They really do deserve 5 stars.
We know when you walk through our doors, you deserve to be cared for. Stop by any of our 11 locations and discover the Alpine Home Medical difference. When you need assistance, we're here for you.
Alpine Home Medical, we bring wellness home.
AlpineHomeMedical.com.
Attention taxpayers, ready for some bad news? With $80 billion in new funding from Congress, the IRS has launched their most aggressive hiring campaign ever to ramp up enforcement. If you're ignoring your taxes, don't delay another minute because your paycheck, your bank account, even your home or business could already be at risk. Now, here's the good news. Optima Tax Relief, America's #1 tax relief firm, can get to work immediately, helping to protect you from the IRS. A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, their tax attorneys and licensed professionals are experts at resolving tax problems. Let them help determine if you qualify for the Fresh Start Initiative or other powerful IRS tax assistance programs. Take control. Call Optima Tax Relief now for a free consultation.
Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief.
Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
Visit Serenoni Luxury Blanket Warehouse Sale. Wednesday, September 6th at Orion Event Center in Linden. Save on the world's softest blankets for babies to adults. Get huge discounts on the best gifts ever.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meeks.
We do have a new accident eastbound on the 21st South Freeway approaching I-215's westbound. It's been moved to the shoulder, but the crash really tying up traffic is in Weber County, impacting both north and southbound. Highway 89 at Combe Road. This is in the South Weber area. It's just north of the I-84 junction. It's a spot you want to consider avoiding and using an alternate route. Renew your smile with Grandpa's Dental. Grandpa's Dental offers cosmetic and routine dentistry. Visit grandpasdental.com for a location near you. That's grandpasdental.com. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, mostly sunny and cool with a high only to 79 today. Then it warms up through the rest of the week, highs close to 90 by Friday. And right now 75 degrees with sunshine at KSL News Radio 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Well, it's clear that President Biden is committed to helping Ukraine fight the war against Russia. But as the war enters its 10th month, the question is it enough to support Ukraine fighting the war, or do we need to actually help Ukraine win the war? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Always pleased to have on the show Jonathan Sweet, of course, retired military intelligence officer. He led the U.S. European Command Intelligence Engagements Division, and someone with just a wealth of experience and deep insight into what's happening, particularly in Ukraine. Another wonderful piece in The Hill, along with his tag team partner, Mark Toth, talking about what the administration needs to do to actually advance the ball here. So much has been said around, providing just enough, and it just seems a day late and a dollar short. And Jonathan, welcome back to the show, and give us some perspective. As I've always said, good enough never is, and it seems like we seem to be stuck in that pattern when it comes to Ukraine.
It does, and thank you for having me back on board. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about Ukraine. Yeah, from an article perspective, just enough, it continues to be just enough. And just like we said earlier, right up front in the article, it's almost like Ukraine's wearing a 25-pound life preserver, and they're just struggling to stay afloat and not able to get to shore. There are opportunities, and there have been opportunities for this administration to assist them. Now's a great time. We have 3 general officers, retired general officers, all combat leaders, saying the same thing, saying that we need to get weapons, specific weapons with capabilities to Ukraine to help them with their breakthrough in their exploitation and to reclaim their territorial lands.
Yeah, and there does seem to be a lot of the chatter around, this is taking so long, this is being so slow. But again, looking at the realities both of what kind of slog it is when you're doing more the counteroffensive as opposed to the defensive action. And then you've mentioned before on this show the need for that deep strike capability. Give us some more perspective around that.
Yeah, and I think many people get overly concerned or deeply involved in a close fight. The close fight's just a piece of the fight. That's where the bulk of the fighting and the dying is occurring. But the condition setting to enable those forces to get through the close fight, the trenches, the minefields, that's all done through the deep fight. That's attriting artillery. That's attriting combat forces as they arrive into the Ukrainian battlefield. That's getting them before they arrive. That's setting good conditions for 2 to 3 days in advance. So when you do break through, you don't come across another battle defensive, and that defensive position's already been taken out, and you can continue to move. The key is momentum and maintain momentum. And each time they have to stop to address a trench line or a minefield, it affords Russia the opportunity to see more mines, to dig more or dig more trenches throughout the depth of the battlefield, eventually, back to the border of Ukraine.
Yeah, and that momentum and that punch through strategy, it's not enough just to take that one piece. If you can use the deep strike capability to create space for the momentum, then that really is what will change the game on the battlefield. Give us a sense, I've been dying to ask you about this. The president has seemed to be at a de-escalation almost at any cost in a lot of places around the world. It seems to be one of the criticisms from both the military side as well as the diplomatic front. This forever de-escalating sometimes seems to be bogging us down in a host of different decisions. How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I feel the same way. It just seems as though sometimes it's just, let's just get this over with so we can move on to the next thing. And you can't just move on. You have to complete the task. And completing the task means providing the right pieces of equipment and hardware and intelligence too. But we have to complete the task, not simply just be done with it. And I think, as so many other cases within this administration, it's just let's just get it done and move on to something else. And we can't do that. Not for the Ukrainian people, not for the security of Eastern Europe. It's critical that decisions are made and weapons and ammunition is allocated to finish the task. And the task is to get Russia out of Ukraine.
Yeah, and so as we look at how that starts to play out, we note the changing at the top on the military side in terms of Ukraine, the defense minister changing there in terms of probably some strategy and some tactic disagreements, and also some corruption. I think that Zelensky is also trying to root out of government there. How do you see that impacting the processing? How do you see that impacting even the willingness of those allies to provide those deep strike and other capabilities?
I certainly hope it doesn't. The strategic implications of removing your Minister of Defense do have those type of effects on supporting countries, but the tactical and operational effects, particularly within the military, with the commanding general there in Ukraine, the commanding general, the chief of intelligence, and President Zelensky are in a sense the three heads of this particular operation. And those three men together are the ones that are generating the morale and generating the cause in order to continue to fight. So it will have some strategic impact, but at the end of the day, those three men are making this happen, and they have put together a battlefield or a battle strategy that many, quite frankly, may or may not understand, but it's working. And it may be working slowly, and it may not be going as fast as people want, but that close fight, that deep fight, but the other fight that's going on too in this multi-domain operation is that fight for influence, particularly within the Russian population. So you are seeing more types of drones that are being fired deep into Russia, not necessarily at civilian targets, but military targets and airfields. And it's countering the narrative of Putin saying we're winning this war, when in fact Russians can go outside their own front doors, look up and see these drones flying overhead and impacting in their country. So it's more than just a close fight and deep fight. It's much broader to include that.
All right. And Jonathan, before I let you go, give us some things to look forward to. Obviously, this is a crucial season before we get the winter onset, where things will definitely bog down in different ways. What are some of the things that you're going to be watching for, both from the administration and also on the battlefield as we move into the fall?
Yeah, I think from the battlefield perspective, what we're looking at is now that there's been discussion of an initial breakthrough of that main defensive belt. Now it comes down to how quickly can they seize on that opportunity to get through the next successive defensive fighting positions. How can they get through there? How can they exploit that? And how can they, as we're seeing a little bit on the outer edges, how are they isolating Crimea? Are they able to shut down these bridges, the land bridges, the physical bridges over the ocean? How are they affecting Russia's ability to resupply and sustain that operation by striking seaports, by striking airfields, by taking out those supply hubs, by disrupting those lines of communications, those rail lines, those highway lines that are connecting those Russian forces? How can they isolate them? And then also in the north, how can they continue to, in the north, hold their own? Remember, the north's not the effort. The north is a supporting effort. And a supporting effort is designed to pull forces away from the main battle area up to that particular area, away from Crimea. So can they sustain that fight in the defense while the main effort is pushing south? So a lot of things to look at, but close, deep, and into Russia are those are the three things you got to look at.
Fantastic. Jonathan Sweet, as always, a great piece in The Hill with Mark Toth on Ukraine. Biden needs to listen to the U.S. generals. I think that's an important part of this process, and one that I think the administration has struggled with over the last 2.5 years. And I think that's an important part of the equation as to who you're listening to and then what kind of strategy we're taking as a result. Jonathan, as always, thanks for your perspective.
Okay, thank you very much for having me back on.
So a lot to consider as we march our way towards the fall, and a real crucial season in Ukraine's battle to push Russia out of their sovereign territory, reclaim what is theirs. And the test, I think, and the challenge for the administration really has been the slowness of the process and how they've moved things forward. It's been a little bite at a time, just enough to fight, but probably not enough to actually win. And so do we need to reframe it? Does the president need to take into account more of what the generals and what the military folks are saying? Do we need to be a little more comfortable with the uncomfortable, leaning into some conflict? Again, this is a support and weapons, not boots on the ground. Those are all questions that we have to grapple with and understand so that we can help Ukraine with the resources, not just to fight, but the resources so that they can take the fight and actually win.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. Before you head to work, before you hit the gym,
Keep going, that's it.
before you make your way home,
Bye.
get a quick check on traffic and weather.
PD on the scene at 8 South and West Temple.
Highway 89 also really backed up.
Listen every 10 minutes on the 9s, in your car at 102.7 FM, or tell Alexa, play KSL News Radio.
You know, it's fall, it's back to school. It's time to get back to you. If you've been carrying around a little too much extra weight, let's get back to the real you. I did it for way too long until I connected with SOTA Weight Loss. SOTA stands for state-of-the-art weight loss, and I got back to the real me. 37 pounds lost in just 90 days with the help of a coach and a nutritionist, an accountability system, a full approach to my relationship to food, using it as fuel and energy, helping my body know what it actually needs to be at its very best. So it's time to get back to it. Get back to the real you, to the best you, to the better version of you. And you can do that with SOTA Weight Loss. It's so simple. It's a science-based, simple approach to help you get where you want to go. As I always say, there's no time to lose. There's only time to win. Now's a great time to start. Check it out at sotaweightloss.com, SOTA weightloss.com.
Whether you own a local business or a global one, you know that these days, generating growth is a challenge. By teaming with Bank of America, you'll not just stay ahead of the curve, you'll move it. With access to experts, award-winning insights, and business solutions so powerful, you'll make every move matter, locally and globally. Visit bankofamerica.com/banking for business to learn more. What would you like the power to do? Copyright 2023 Bank of America, N.A.
Mr. Clean, Mr. Clean.
Of course I use Mr. Clean Magic Eraser to clean tough messes off my stovetop and bathtub. But then I discovered I can also use it to easily clean my patio furniture and even my shoes. I'm hooked.
And when wipes won't cut it, I use Magic Eraser Sheets. They're thin and flexible erasers, perfect for everyday messes, like gunk on my counters and sinks. They really are magical.
The reviews are in. Mr. Clean Magic Eraser and Sheets make cleaning look easy.
Listen to the greatest classical hits from the 1700s to today. The Utah Symphony's Masterworks concerts offer elegant and entertaining evenings at Marisa Brovnal Hall in the heart of Salt Lake City, featuring timeless masterpieces by Beethoven, Dvorak, and Mozart, and even world premieres from modern composers. Tickets start as low as $21. Get yours at utahsymphony.org. The Utah Symphony presents one of the biggest hits from 1893, Dvorak's New World Symphony. A piece so iconic it inspired the scores for Jaws and Star Wars, and even joined Neil Armstrong during the first moon landing in 1969. This is your perfect first symphony concert. Join the Utah Symphony September 15th and 16th for a jaw-dropping performance of Dvorak's New World Symphony. Tickets start as low as $21. Get yours today at utahsymphony.org.
2 years ago, Americans watched in horror as a crisis unfolded at the Kabul airport.
There's desperation and anguish.
More than 80,000 Afghans have since arrived in America, but this story is still unfolding. I'm Andrea Smartin. In my new podcast, Stranger Becomes Neighbor, we'll find out what happens to these new arrivals in our communities. Who would help our newest neighbors? Follow us at kslpodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen.
Any Hour Services free furnace sale is going on right now. If you haven't scheduled your free estimate yet, what are you waiting for? Call Any Hour Services today or schedule online at anyhourservices.com.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, Ogden police are investigating a fatal shooting last night. They say the suspect has been cooperating with officers. Second, students at Olympus High School were on lockdown for a while today while police dealt with a security risk. One student was detained as a precaution. Third, the technical glitch that grounded United Airlines flights this morning has now been resolved. Right now, 75 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
As we survey common challenges on everything from the South China Sea to critical and emerging technologies, the United States and Vietnam will chart out a vision for facing the 21st century together with an elevated and energized partnership.
That was National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan today, previewing President Biden's upcoming trip to Vietnam. The president, of course, will be in India for the G20 first and then in Vietnam. And we wanted to break all of that down and what does it mean in the context of China? And nobody better to do that with than Phelim Kine, D.C.-based China correspondent for Politico. And Phelim, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
Let's dig on in. You had a great piece talking about the strategic partnership deal with Vietnam. And what does that actually mean in terms of countering China? What does that look like?
Well, I think this is all part and parcel of the Biden administration's Indo-Pacific strategy, which is essentially rallying allies and partners. It's essentially counter China's growing economic, diplomatic, and military influence in the Indo-Pacific region. And so that's what we've seen with the Biden administration signing a new strategic cooperation agreement with the ASEAN, all of the ASEAN states last year. And I think, being able to do something likewise with Vietnam is, really demonstrative of the efforts that the Biden administration's taking to try to bring in any and all possible partners and allies in this. I mean, let's not forget that, Vietnam-U.S. relations were absolutely derailed by the Vietnam War. There was no diplomatic relations for 20 years until the U.S. reopened or opened an embassy in Hanoi in 1995. So to a large extent, the U.S. is sort of trying to make up for lost time with its former enemy and doing quite nicely in terms of being able to get to this point where they have a strategic partnership agreement that to a certain extent almost matches what Vietnam already has with both longtime allies, Russia and China.
And let's dig into that just a little bit. We don't know all the details in terms of what is in that deal, but we know the focus, of course, is on the high-tech sector, semiconductor production. What else do we know?
I think it's really important to stress what this isn't, and this isn't really a sign that that Vietnam is moving closer in alignment with the U.S. I mean, I really think what we're seeing is Vietnam giving a master class in strategic diplomacy in being able to build a more robust relationship, particularly in the economic realm with the U.S., while maintaining this very difficult but important relationship with China, this giant neighbor, and with Russia. And so essentially for what Hanoi is looking for is high technology assistance cooperation in the realms of semiconductor manufacturing, artificial intelligence, and even electrical vehicles. So they're looking for a way for the U.S. to help to pump prime their manufacturing prowess so that they're on track with this, where the 21st century manufacturing is going.
Yeah, I love the way you frame that as a master class. I don't know that anybody, if you would have asked them that 6 months ago, is it Vietnam that's going to give us the master class in diplomacy? But dig into that a little bit for us in terms of how do they balance that in terms of obviously the very big neighbor and someone that's been a longtime partner for them. How do they balance this increasing connection with the U.S. without totally upsetting the apple cart in terms of their relationship with China?
Well, the short answer is they do it very delicately. But I think, I think what we see is it's baby steps. And I think it's done in close consultation with Beijing, so that they know, so that Beijing is clear on what it isn't, on what these, on what a deepening relationship with the U.S. what it isn't. And I mean, it's fascinating to think that you now have the U.S. Peace Corps is back in Vietnam, that you have U.S. carrier groups that make port calls in Vietnamese ports, but there is not a deepening or growing military relationship. Vietnam does nothing that will make the large and much more heavily armed and greater populated neighbor particularly nervous or upset. So it's a delicate dance, but they do it.
Yeah. One of the things you pointed out in your piece that caught my attention was the challenge that the Biden administration will have on kind of this value-based foreign policy and the still very, repressive authoritarian style regime in Vietnam. How are again, another delicate dance to be sure.
Yeah, I mean, this is it, and you can bet that as the meeting, as Biden's trip draws closer, you're going to have very sharp criticism from human rights organizations who will rightly decry the fact that Vietnam has an atrocious human rights record, one that's been getting worse in terms of repression, repression of religious freedoms, freedom of association, freedom of expression. This is a regime that it's an authoritarian one-party state, very similar to that of its neighbor China. And so, the U.S. And Jake Sullivan and I think Biden will be stressing the idea of economic partnerships, the idea of alignment in terms of the rules-based international order, in terms of how the South China Sea and shipping works, and basically, awkward silence in terms of the bigger and to a certain extent more important human rights issues. So it's awkward for the Biden administration, given its values, its statement of having a values-based foreign policy. It's not happening here.
Yeah, that's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out when they're actually there on the ground. That will be a real interesting test to see what the president says, what he doesn't say, and how that all plays out will be really interesting. I also wanted to ask you, Phelim, Vice President Harris, of course, is heading to the Southeast Asian Nations Summit. And this is one where, again, President Biden's going to take a little heat for being absent, not present in this one. How do you see that one playing?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of old, ASEAN State Department hands, and to a man, woman, they say this is a really bad idea that Biden isn't going to the U.S. ASEAN Summit and the East Asian Summit, which is attached to it in Jakarta. It's already started, and it's because it looks like Biden is sort of backtracking on this promise of a new era in U.S.-ASEAN relations, which he promised at an U.S.-ASEAN summit last year. And you have to remember that ASEAN memories of the Obama-era 2011 quote-unquote Asian pivot, that was very short-lived. The Middle Eastern wars drew the Obama administration away from Asia. So they're very sensitive to this idea that the U.S. has a short attention span, that ASEAN is sort of taken for granted, and that they send the second string, which is rather than the president himself. I spoke to a former Thai foreign minister who basically said this, having Vice President Harris go is kind of like a consolation prize, that they want the president, they need it. And every State Department official who has contact with ASEAN will tell you showing up is everything, and he's not.
Yeah, especially in that region of the world, being there, that face-to-face connection is so important in so many of those countries, and it is one of those. It's almost in the head-scratcher department of could you not have coordinated? You're going to be in the neighborhood anyway, and it's a long neighborhood to get to. Why the president doesn't make a swing through there seems a little bit. Any insight in terms of why the president chose not to put these trips together?
Well, I mean, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said, look, that nobody has done more in terms of the U.S.-ASEAN relationship than President Biden. That he was at these same summits last year. And, and basically what they're saying implicitly is the president can't be everywhere. And, it's worth noting that Vice President Kamala Harris has also done several trips to the region. She is the vice president. She speaks for and represents the president. So, they're not getting, a junior staffer. They're getting the vice president of the United States. And, I think in the end, I think it comes down to, the president is of a certain age. Travel is tough. And if you string together three major engagements, it might be a little bit wearing on the man. And, the president can't be everywhere and do everything.
Yeah, having done those trips, used to do those several times a year. It's taxing on a young man, and those are tough trips and tough to be there. Great perspective as always. One of our favorites as it relates to how we deal with China and this part of the world. Nobody better in the business. And Phelim, we're so grateful to have you on the show, and great writing as always, great reporting, and we look forward to having you back soon.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir.
That's Phelim Kine, best in the business, D.C.-based China correspondent for Politico. We'll step aside for bottom of the hour news. More coming up next on Inside Sources.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bonas. KSL's top local story this hour. Golfers at the Rose Park Golf Course spotted a body near the Jordan River this morning. Police and firefighters have now recovered the body, and they routinely bring homicide detectives into these kinds of investigations. It's still open. They haven't yet released additional information in that case. Burning Man left thousands of people stuck in the mud, but a Salt Lake City man says that didn't stop the celebration. KSL News Radio's Alexandria Bonilla reports.
Adam works and lives in Salt Lake City, but for the second year in a row, he braved the Nevada desert to experience the celebration. And despite the less than ideal weather conditions, he said their band continued to play in the rain and mud. He watched people dance and make mud sculptures, only to see outsiders call them stranded and in danger. He said they had more than enough resources and were doing just fine.
And Adam thinks the unique circumstances at the gathering this year made everybody closer and showed the community just what kind of effects the celebration brings. Our top national story this hour from ABC News. There's now less than a month before the U.S. faces another government shutdown. The White House says it has little confidence Congress can pass the budget bills by then, so it's offering another solution. ABC's Andy Field has the latest.
They've done it dozens of times before. No official passed budget, just a quick Band-Aid to keep the government open.
Congress will need to pass a short-term continuing resolution to keep the government running.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre also urging Congress to pass additional funding for Ukraine, along with Maui and Hurricane Idalia relief, something a number of House Republicans have resisted. Andy Field, ABC News, Washington.
Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average at the close of trading today, down 195 points. The NASDAQ was down about 10 points. The S&P 500 down 19. And just ahead, it looks like our weather is going to get a little warmer day by day, up to the upper 90s again. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
What do you need to hear in the morning to feel ready for the day?
Important news that happened overnight, the traffic you'll hit on the roads.
You'll be ready for your day with us.
Join Utah's Morning News 5 to 9 on KSL News Radio.
Attention smart homeowners. You don't have to fall for flashy promises and companies that don't even prove their work. At Your Service Pros uses third-party verification software called MeasureQuick to ensure your new HVAC system is installed correctly. This ultimate game changer in the HVAC industry lets you, the homeowner, have proof of how your system was installed. At Your Service Pros utilizes our Bluetooth tools to upload all of your system's information into MeasureQuick. We rely on data-driven insights to properly commission, optimize, and fine-tune your HVAC system for peak performance, improving your family's comfort, lowering your utility bills, and extending the life of your HVAC system. With rebates and tax credits available totaling more than $7,500 on a dual fuel heating and cooling system, it is now more important than ever that your HVAC system be installed correctly. So call us today at 801-YOUR-PRO. That's 801-YOUR-PRO. Have the peace of mind of saving up to 50% on your new system and knowing it's installed correctly by calling 801-YOUR-PRO.
Take a second and think about how many different software systems you have in order to manage the people who work for you, and of course the people you want to work for you. There's the applicant tracking, the new hire onboarding, your paid time off, your payroll, time and attendance, your online employee benefits enrollment, ACA compliance, your COBRA compliance, and the list is not just daunting, but it seems every time you turn around, it's growing. It's time you quit losing sleep over that list and let someone else do it for you. Magellan HCM has the technology and local service team to pull all those systems and services into one place, simplifying the process for everyone and significantly reducing the errors that will always occur when you're managing all those tasks in different systems. There is a better way. Magellan HCM. Text HCM to 57500 and set up a demo of their highly awarded technology and see for yourself what a difference Magellan can make for you and your company. Text HCM to 57500.
Get Mr. Mag's Performance Missionary Package. 1 performance suit, 4 and collar stretch shirts, 3 ties, 1 mission belt, and 1 pair of Echo or Johnston & Murphy shoes. Just $595.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Ricky Meese.
Good speeds on the Valley freeways. We still have crews working on this crash. It's in the final cleanup stages on Highway 89 in the South Weber area, north of the I-84 junction. All vehicles look to have been moved out of traffic to the shoulder. BYU's finest student dance ensembles present World of Dance, featuring the Ballroom Dance Company, Contemporary Dance Theater, International Folk Dance, and Living Legends Theater Ballet and Young Ambassadors. Ricky Meese in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, mostly sunny and cool, a high only up to 79. Then it warms up through the rest of the week with highs close to 90 by Friday. And right now, 77 degrees and sunny at KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Your all-day companion for news.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
We're really thrilled to be joined in studio today by President Camille Ann Johnson, General Relief Society President for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. President, thanks for making time for us today.
I'm always happy to be here with you, Boyd. Thank you.
You have had an amazing sprint over the last few months, including going over to the Notre Dame Religious Liberty Summit that was convened in London. Give us some perspective of who you met with and why that was so important.
It was a sweet privilege for me to have the opportunity to address that group. It was an international group of people. Many of them are academics that have invested their professional lives into researching and protecting religious liberty. And there were also a number of religious leaders that were convened for that gathering. So I made some wonderful new friends, made some new connections, and had an opportunity to address a group with a panel that included a Catholic bishop from Nigeria and a rabbi who works as a chaplain at a university there in England. And it was really a wonderful opportunity, as I say, to make those connections. It's clear to me that as we develop those connections and work together, we can accomplish so much more as a united front in terms of protecting religious liberty.
It's so important. And we've talked about this in so many different places and spaces as we look at religious liberty really being the first of the first freedoms here in America, but around the world, it really is a precursor to human flourishing. Tell us about that part of the conversation.
A precursor to a peaceful society, to a society that has less violence, to societies that protect the rights of their children and the family. So seeing these smart and hardworking people come together in that cause, I'm optimistic that working together, we can continue to protect those vital freedoms.
Yeah, you delivered a landmark address that was so powerful, and I love that you referenced the beginning of Relief Society, one of the largest and oldest women's organizations in the world, and this wonderful phrase that I can't get out of my head, that these extraordinary opportunities and challenges and these pressing callings. Give us some sense of that.
Yeah. Emma Smith said in 1842, at the time the Relief Society was organized, that the women expected extraordinary occasions and pressing calls. So I used that phrase as a way of introducing who I was, a member of the Relief Society, but also to explain that it is an extraordinary occasion and pressing call. And if like-minded people don't come together in protection of those freedoms, they'll fail us. It requires action for us to preserve and protect those freedoms.
Yeah. I want to get to some of those other extraordinary calls, those pressing calls and extraordinary occasions for the women of the world. Part of your role as the Relief Society General President is to look at women and children all around the world in conjunction with the presiding bishopric and others. Those are really extraordinary occasions and pressing calls. Give us some perspective of that.
Yeah. Well, we are focused in on the needs of women and children. When I say women, it's important for us to bless the lives of expectant mothers so that they may flourish and that their children will flourish as well. As a church, we have made significant contributions to organizations that are interested in blessing the lives of women and children, particular emphasis on the nutrition of children up to age 5. I actually had an opportunity in February to visit Uganda, and I was there with officials of UNICEF because the church had made a contribution to UNICEF. part of a program called No Time to Waste. And the point is that we have to address the nutritional needs of these children early so that they can flourish as teenagers and adults. And it was just really breathtaking, heartbreaking, and heartwarming all at the same time, because we really had found the one. We'd figured out how to address the needs of these children by educating their mothers primarily, teaching them about appropriate nutrition and how they could draw upon the resources that were available to them to provide nutritious food for their children was really lovely. Then those mothers that were educated went out and educated other mothers. It was really ministering the way that that effort was accomplished. But I was privileged to be part of that effort to assess the work of UNICEF, and pleased to report that it was going well in the northeast part of Uganda.
And I love that whole model, because that's not a model just for Africa or for places that are suffering. That's a model for us right here in our own neighborhood. I love this concept that you often speak to, that we have the dollar contributions, we have the big opportunities to do big things. But it really is exactly what you just described. It's educating one mother who educates one mother who takes care of their children, and then their community, and everybody rises in the process.
Yeah. The Bishop's Storehouse is really the resources we bring to bear. And some have financial resources to contribute. Others have time and talents. But whatever it is that we have to contribute, we are part of this global cause to bless Heavenly Father's children. And what motivates us? It's love. It's love for our Heavenly Father, and it's love for our neighbor. And so we are compelled, and we want to care for those in need, because they're our brothers and sisters. So without regard to location or race or political persuasion or religion, we'll do our best to care for those in need.
Oh, that's such a powerful and important message. So often we look at people who are struggling, whether it's with food insecurity or housing insecurity or addiction, and so often they get viewed as a liability to be managed rather than a human asset with divine potential. And the Relief Society all around the world is focused on that divine potential, often meeting a physical need or an emotional need so that they can rise.
Knowing who we are changes everything. When we recognize for ourselves that we're children of a loving Heavenly Father with that divine identity and divine potential, we see others in the same way. And then our responsibility, and really it's a blessing. Our blessed opportunity then is to help them, to care for them the way the Savior would.
Fantastic. Before I let you go, President, I always want to know what's under the radar. What's the thing you wish we were talking about more as you look at particularly as you look at the women of the world and look at our communities? What do you wish we were having more conversations about?
I wish my sisters around the world were talking about the last words of President Nelson. Whatever he's taught last is what we ought to be focusing in on. And since his conference talk about peacemakers being needed, I hope that our efforts and energies have been focused on that. He actually communicates with us all about every 10 days using his social media account. And if you're following that, you see that he's built upon his Peacemakers Needed message and helped us understand better how we can stand up for what we believe, standing up for truth, but doing it in a way that creates peace rather than contention. So I hope my sisters are focused on the last words, the latest words from our president, President Nelson.
Yeah, so important. And I'm going to sneak in one last question, because that was just too good of an answer not to not to play off of. And that is this whole idea of being a peacemaker. We live in a time where we talk about the polarization politically, and yet when we come together in service, everything goes away. Nobody's asking who you voted for in the last election if you're helping a neighbor clean their yard or if you're down at the soup kitchen. How can we use both President Nelson's message about being a peacemaker? How do we use that to actually bring community together and to strengthen individuals, families, and communities?
You know who's really good at that are our children and our youth. Following their example, you roll up your sleeves and you play with whoever's out on the playground, right? And you figure out how to make things work. And then you all go over together and take care of the person who fell down and, and is hurt. I think maybe we can learn a lot from the way our children respond I wish our sisters were paying attention to what President Nelson was saying.
Yeah.
And if we would listen to him and if we would follow his counsel, he knows what we need. He knows what we need in anticipation of this upcoming political season. And so he counseled with us in April to be peacemakers. And it, you know, I remember when he said, if there's anything virtuous, lovely, of good report, or praiseworthy, you should say that. And if you can't think of anything to say that falls in that category, he didn't say it quite this way, but keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
It's harder than it sounds.
Yeah.
And as we try to express our beliefs, which are important, we have an obligation to speak up and speak out. As women of the church, that's something that we've been asked to do. Yeah. But to do it in a way that doesn't invite contention, but must be given with our conviction, is something I'm certainly working at. It's something we can all work at. And I'm so happy to have received that prophetic direction and that prophetic invitation to do better at that.
I don't think there's a more important invitation for our time across political spectrum, across religious spectrum, all of that. There's nothing more important than peacemakers. It really is the bridge that takes us to important places. President Johnson, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
We'll step aside for one last break. Some final thoughts coming up on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Doug Wright, and there are good things in the air. You can feel it, you can see it, you can experience it. Football, the kids are back in school. It's beginning to cool off a little bit. Fall is in the air, and a great place to go this fall for the best meal you've ever had. It's Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Now let's talk about going up to the mountains where the leaves are just beginning to turn. It's going to be gorgeous. And at Hotel Park City, there's a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse waiting for you. So many things are going on in the heart of downtown Salt Lake City, and there's a Ruth's Chris Steakhouse downtown for you as well at 275 South West Temple. That steak that you've been longing for, cooked to perfection, the perfect temperature, the side dishes, the desserts. They're at both locations of Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. So call and make your reservations now. When Dee and I ate there the other night, it was so delicious, so good. That first bite, you're going to love it at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse.
Sometimes we're faced with a crossroads in life and we don't know which path to take. Maybe you're thinking about a career change or feeling like your relationship needs some TLC. Whatever it is, BetterHelp Therapy can help you map out your future and trust yourself to find the way forward. BetterHelp is entirely online therapy that offers video, phone, or even live chat online therapy sessions. You have a busy life, so BetterHelp is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist in under 48 hours, and you can also switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Give BetterHelp Online Therapy a try and get on your way to being your best self. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/KSL. That's betterhelp.com/KSL.
Some days I cover up because of my moderate to severe plaque psoriasis. Now I'm hitting the road with clearer skin thanks to Skyrizi, Risankizumab Riza, a prescription-only 150 milligram injection for adults who are candidates for systemic or phototherapy. With Skyrizi, 3 out of 4 people achieved 90% clearer skin at 4 months. And Skyrizi is just 4 doses a year after 2 starter doses.
Don't use if allergic to Skyrizi. Serious allergic reactions and an increased risk of infections or a lower ability to fight them may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check for infection and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms such as fever, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, or if you plan to or recently received a vaccine.
Thanks to Skyrizi, there's nothing on my skin, and that means everything. Your doctor today about Skyrizi, the #1 dermatologist prescribed biologic in psoriasis, and visit skyrizi.com or call 1-866-SKY-RIZI to learn more.
The Utah RV Super Show at Mountain America Expo Center in Sandy, September 14th through 17th. Get information and discount passes at utahRVSupershow.com.
Jeff Kaplan.
I'm energized by breaking news. First of all, because it's right now, and second of all, because in many cases the audience needs to know. There's no more important service that we can provide, and I find it critically important to get more details to the audience as quickly as possible. There's nothing more energizing than that for me. Not at all. The most important thing we do is breaking news.
Jeff Kaplan's Afternoon News, 3 to 7 on KSL News Radio.
I'm Andy Farnsworth from KSL News Radio.
And I'm Kellyanne Halverson.
And we're hosts of KSL's Fan Effect podcast.
That's Fan Effect with an E.
We're excited to share with you our knowledge
and arguments
on everything pop culture and fandom, featuring movie and television reviews, pop culture deep dives into video games, cosplay, fandom events, and more. Listen regularly on your favorite podcast platform at kslnewsradio.com, kslpodcasts.com, or on the KSL News Radio app.
And remember, that's Fan Effect with an E.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, police recovered a body from the Jordan River this morning at the Rose Park Golf Course. So far, they're not saying much about the investigation. Second, heavy rain and mud didn't stop the celebration at Burning Man, even though people were stuck where they were for a couple of days. And third, the federal government is facing another shutdown at the end of the month unless Congress can find a compromise solution on funding. Right now, 77 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Well, it is an election day here in the state of Utah. That's a little bit odd to have an election the day after Labor Day, but here we are. And, of course, that will march towards the general election, which will also be a little odd in terms of timing, just before Thanksgiving in November. And as we talk about all of the candidates, and before we talk about the candidates, if you haven't voted yet in your municipal election, or if you're in the 2nd Congressional District, go cast a vote. You can still do that throughout the day today, and you can actually do your vote by mail as long as it's postmarked today. Your vote will count. So no excuses, no reason not to. This is a chance to stand up, to speak out, to have your voice be heard in an important election. And as we talk about the candidates, whether it's candidates in the CD2 race or a municipal election, or whether it's those vying for the highest office in the land, the presidency, we often talk about it in the context of the Happy Warrior. I'm a Happy Warrior fan myself. I think Happy Warriors just know how to travel better and travel differently. And, of course, that actually comes from the classic poem, The Character of the Happy Warrior, from William Wordsworth. And he actually begins with the question, who is the Happy Warrior? And then he lays out in, of course, his powerful prose, a wide-ranging traits worthy of all of us to pursue. And in our day where we have so many angry warriors, angry politicians, divisive rhetoric, dehumanizing contempt, I think the country is actually in need of a few more happy warriors. I once did a segment on our show about the happy warriors, and I talked to a whole host of them. We talked to Joe Lieberman. We talked to then Senator Ben Sass. We talked to Bob Woodward. We talked to UVU President Astrid Tuminez, and a host of others. And we talked about what it is that is inspiring and thoughtful and hope-filled for the future of the country. And I was thinking about it this morning. The reaction to this segment was really interesting. Most of it was positive, but there were some who accused me of being soft, or of wearing rose-colored glasses, or being naive, or being a sellout, or a squish, or being an apologist. And amazingly, those comments were coming from the far left and the far right. Some said I just had my head in the sand. And there were a few other things that we won't mention on the program. But I'm always fascinated by how individuals can interpret the same information in such different ways. And so, just to be really clear, as we talk about the case for the happy warrior in our country and in our communities, there are significant issues and challenges in this country and in our communities right here in the state that need to be addressed. And there are founding principles that need to be defended. There are vulnerable people and a planet to protect. There's out-of-control spending and debt to correct. There's mass violence to end. There's societal ills to combat. There's minority and religious rights to preserve. And the list goes on and on and on. Now, I know for a certainty that just a good old group hug is not going to solve any of those issues. and that there'll be real battles in the years ahead on what to do, how to solve each of those challenges, and yes, even fights about fundamental tenets governing our republic. And these battles will not be for the faint of heart. But you've heard me say this before. America is always better when we address our difficulties with big ideas, along with open, honest, and sometimes even roiling debate. It's a good thing. So yes, big battles about big ideas and principles are the heart of the American experiment. They always have been. But what we need to remember is that having a big debate or a fundamental disagreement doesn't mean that we have to be mean or even demeaning. Just because someone disagrees with us does not mean they are evil or bad. I actually believe in the marketplace of ideas in this country, and that America doesn't need to be an isolated ideological battlefield. We can do better than that. And so as I look at things where we are and what's likely to be ahead of us in the year coming, 2024, I just want to lay the marker down. So, number one, I've met happy warriors on the political left, and I have met happy warriors on the political right. I have met angry warriors on both sides of the political aisle as well. And I have to tell you, being an angry warrior is exhausting to the individual, and it's exasperating to everybody else. So, regardless of political persuasion, I think it's wise to be very careful that we don't make the mistake of assuming that a happy warrior is somehow not a warrior. That they're somehow soft, or a squish, or a sellout, or an apologist. I've observed that angry warriors may win a few battles, but they rarely win the war, and they never, ever win hearts and minds of those they're actually trying to persuade. I was reminded recently that the true warrior is successful not because he or she hates what's in front of them, but because they love what is behind them. And I think that's true, whether it's a physical fight of a war or a battle of principles, values, or even public policy. So I think Wordsworth got it right as he reflected on what is it that is the happy warrior. I think it applies to philosophical, political, social, moral battles of our day, and that's how we need to approach things. In fact, I remember having a conversation some time ago with George Will, who, by the way, will actually be in the state of Utah tomorrow. He'll be up at Weber State University. He and I are going to have a Constitution Day conversation with the students up there. It is open to the public up at Weber State University, our friends up there. That's going to be a great conversation about principles. But one of the things that I've always admired about George Will is he said, look, of all the battles and all the angry warriors out there who are trying to gain political power or positioning or just attention, he said the best way to go about it is to just be cheerful. He said, we have far too much teeth-gritted politics and fist-clenched politics in this country. And we need to step back and understand something. And that is that this is a country and the people are still fighting to get in it because this is an extraordinary place. Yes, we have big problems. Yes, we have big challenges. And we can do it. We can deal with it. Not teeth gritted, fist clenched, but cheerful. Happy warrior. It actually works. And I would actually add that the happy warrior is also wise enough to know that sometimes instead of engaging in a battle, the happy warrior should go in search of the soul instead. Sometimes we waste a lot of time on battles that really aren't important. They might be interesting, they might be entertaining, they might be good for fundraising, but they don't really get us to the soul of the nation. So be a happy warrior today. All right, that wraps up Inside Sources today here on KSL News Radio. I am Boyd Matheson. Thanks for joining us. And as always, as you go out into the world today, make sure you see something that inspires, say something that uplifts, and do something that makes a difference.
KSL FM Midvale, KSL Salt Lake City. Listen on the KSL News Radio app and in your car at 102.7 FM.